to what I felt from you, which was a softening, I felt like I could actually be a little bit more vulnerable. And that opened the door for me to start to be humble, to allow myself to be humble. Because to be humble is to acknowledge your imperfections. And when you feel like somebody's about to walk out the door, you think, well, if they see the real truth, that'll push them out the door.
Having, again, walked through a season of tearing the house down in our marriage and rebuilding, I see the worst as the commitment to sticking with it and staying together when things are rocky, they're messy. You're, again, tearing the house down. You're looking at the ugliest parts of yourself, and then you're sharing that with your partner. The crazy part is you already know it, but to hear it come with the humility and the honesty out of the mouth of your partner. Welcome to the podcast, Dante.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored.
I know.
I'm honored to be in the presence of a celebrity.
Yes, me and my giant audience, growing audience.
Of course.
Yeah.
Always growing.
So the reason I wanted to invite you on the podcast today, we want to do a series together, is because in all the years of me coaching, and the majority of the clients that I've had over the years are women, I have found that as women are going through different changes in life, especially the midlife transition years, as they're coming out of the crux of raising children, perhaps the peak of their career, they often are really unhappy in their marriage. They lose themselves. They feel like they don't know who they are. And as my listeners know from listening to so many of my podcasts, I myself went through a big dark night of the soul. You know, it was 6-ish years ago, so mid 40s. And our children were entering into the teenage years, and I was really feeling lost as to who I even was and who we were in our relationship. For our audience, Dante and I met when we were really young.
High school.
We were in high school. We are high school sweethearts. Very, very unique. We always say that that's not for the faint of heart. It sounds very romantic. And we grew up together. We got married at 23 and 24. We had children, started our family 5 years into the marriage. And we've learned a lot about what it is to be in a marriage, in a union, in a healthy marriage, which is what we're in today.
Yes, I like to think so.
We've done a lot of work.
I agree.
We've done a lot of work. And when I went into again, what I call the dark night of the soul season of my life, and I found someone to work with me, that was Molly. I think it's very appropriate that we're recording this podcast today because we're actually recording on October 13th, and it would have been Molly's 64th birthday today. And I hired Molly to coach me. And then after a little while, you started to see the changes in me. And one of the things that I brought to the table in my work with Molly was that I was unhappy. I was unhappy in our marriage. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do with that. I felt like metaphorically I had one foot out the door, but I never wanted divorce. I didn't want to end what we'd had all those years. I just needed to find myself again. And Molly started working with you, and you worked with Molly individually, separately. We didn't do couples coaching. We really worked separately with her because what Molly taught both of us was that for a healthy marriage, to create that third thing, we really needed to become healthier ourselves. So the work for us was really so much more individual and getting to know who we are, understanding the patterns in our own behavior, the limiting beliefs that we both carried, conditioning that we brought into the marriage that we were unaware of. We're talking 22 years later that we really did the deep, hard work. Early in our marriage, we did marriage counseling. Before we had children, we did go to a marriage counselor, which was really helpful. We did premarital counseling, which was also really helpful. There's different seasons, I think, of marriage. So for us, we really entered into a season of essentially tearing the house down.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think we've both always been truth seekers. Yeah. And so, as young as we were and as little as we knew, we were both always very committed. And we both were always open to learning, even if we were closed off in areas and we didn't realize that we were closed off to those areas. And we can, of course, talk to any specifics around that. But for both of us, we always had a commitment to the relationship and a priority on the relationship, and recognized that once we had got married, we were making a covenant. We were signing a covenant, an agreement, and that was not something to be broken lightly, really at all, but certainly not lightly. So I think that really helped us. And we've experienced a lot, as you said. I mean, a lot of ups and downs through that time, breakups in college and time apart from one another. And then at the same time, real breakthroughs in getting to understand one another, getting to see one another. And I will say that what I think happens to a lot of couples is, you get into an early routine, you get into a certain dynamic, and you just never get out of that loop. It becomes an infinite loop of how you say one thing and how they hear it, how they get defensive about it and how they respond, and how, this whole cycle that goes on, because each of you start writing stories in your own respective worlds, and figuring out how to get past all that is very, very challenging. And it requires a lot of humility. And, ultimately, I think that we both benefited from realizing, and Molly helped a lot with this, realizing what our hierarchy needed to be. Here's what the hierarchy needs to be. Here's what it is today. And it's not what it needs to be. Right. And once we aligned on what the hierarchy was, everything else started to fall into place.
It did. It took us a
It
beat.
takes a
It
while.
definitely took us a
I'm not
beat
saying overnight.
because the ego,
Yeah.
the
Well,
ego
the
is a
ego's
hungry
part of it.
dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you're in a relationship and you've got, things that are stacking up, your list of grievances against the other person, you do a lot of you. A lot of, I'm the victim here and you are the persecutor. You're the one that is creating the unsafety in this relationship. You're the one that has me in control mode. And what we really learned, both of us, was how to take responsibility for our part in our own lane. Molly did a great job teaching each of us what it was to stay in our lane. You're in yours and I'm in mine. We've come together in a marriage, committed to spending the rest of our lives together, going in the same direction, but you're in your own car, in your own lane, and you could be going at a different speed on the freeway than me. That doesn't make you better or worse than me. You're in your own lane. And what I did for the majority of our relationship until I knew better was to go over into your lane a lot and try and fix you, try and control you, try and change you so that you would be who I perceived I needed you to be, so that I felt safer, so that I was more assured in different areas.
Yep. And that's where it starts, is you not feeling safe, you know, and that's part of your intuition as a woman, because you were right to not feel safe. At that time, what was going on in our relationship was not, you were right to not feel safe. And I have to say that humbly, because it's just the truth. I was not living up to my masculine responsibilities, and I wasn't living in the masculine energy the way that I should have been. And there's any number of reasons for that. People obviously don't choose to be that way. It's a lifetime of conditioning that makes a person that way. And you came to recognize that your part in it was, you were moving into the masculine space because I was leaving a vacuum there. Like I own that. I was leaving a vacuum, and you're moving into that masculine space, and that makes you uncomfortable because you're not in a space that's normal for you, a healthy space for you. So the fact that you feel unsafe is not surprising. And so one of the things we discussed before we started recording was we were talking about what are the different themes that we think we can talk through, because Rome is not built in a day, right? And we've been through over 27 years together at this point. And so, as you said, this didn't come easy. It also was not a every day you make these improvements, every day this is an average of improvements. We saw periods of plateau and then huge leaps in where we were until changes within the past year, where I would say we just broke into a whole new space where we're like on another level now. We're on another level that I would hope other people would want to be in, because we are now entering the part of our lives that a lot of people may be able to relate to, which is kids are getting older. They're about to be out of the house, and it's going to be just you and me. Well, we better enjoy one another's company. We're going to be out in the house together. It's going to be really tough otherwise. It's like you either learn how to have all the arguments you need to have to get to the place where you can have equanimity, or you slowly strangle one another over the course of the next 40 years. You know what I mean? It's like those are kind of the two choices. And the second choice sucks. It really sucks. So we can, if you want, we can talk about some of the specific things that we've dealt with. I also thought we should talk a little bit about what are the themes that we want to talk about over the next few weeks, because I think it'll take us a few podcasts to go through and talk about all these themes. Do you want to talk through that now?
I do. I actually want to touch base before we move on hierarchy, because you brought up how us really rearranging our hierarchy made all the difference for us in our marriage and in the work that we were entering into. Again, as Dante has emphasized, the work begins when you decide that there are things to improve upon and you make that commitment with fervor, with patience, with persistence, with belief that it's possible to create the change that you're seeking. Right. So that's step one. And when you make that commitment, for us, rearranging the hierarchy was so important. And it took us a beat, because each of us had to work on humility in our own lane. Each of us had a lot of pride in the way. As I said earlier in the podcast, when you're in this state in a marriage where you've got grievances, you're not necessarily happy in all areas, it's easier to point the finger at the other person. It's easier to say, it's your problem, it's your fault, you're making me this way, than it is to take ownership of your role, because there are two people in the relationship. So once I was able to personally drop into a space of humility, and I realized when I started working with Molly that there was no point in me doing the work that she and I were doing together, because it was so intense. She was there to really, really help me tear the house down and rebuild with a really strong foundation. There was no point in doing that and showing up for that and paying the money for it and spending the time for it if I was going to be prideful. I had to drop into a space where I was humble enough to be honest. You cannot be honest without humility. So once I dropped into humility and admitted that I wasn't perfect, that I had room for growth and change, and that I also played a role in our marriage, then I was able to say, oh, I was I was putting myself above God. I was putting myself above God in the relationship. And our relationship was suffering because of that. God was at the bottom. It took me really, really taking a look in the mirror at myself and how prideful I was and how much I was fueling my own ego, to realize, oh, I've got to put God in God's righteous place. I've got to put God first. God is in me and God's in you. And when I come from a place of wanting to be the best me that I can be, to be the woman that God created me to be, and tapping into source, which is again within me, I have full access to all that is the divine inside of me, that I realize I don't have to do this on my own. It actually doesn't hurt so badly to look in the mirror and to own my part and to own the ways that I was creating discourse in our marriage, and to work with you and to have patience. There would be no other way for me to have the patience and persistence that I have had in the last 5+ years of rebuilding our marriage without me tapping in to God's love. And I wasn't doing that. I was seeking. There was a lot of me seeking, again, seeking safety, seeking validation, seeking my worth, and putting it on you in a lot of ways. And once I realized that, oh, wait, I have the infinite source of all that is, of love inside of me, I'm going to come from that place. And when I come from that place, then I can actually love you from that place. 1 Corinthians 13 is read at most weddings. It was read at our wedding. Love is patient, love is kind, love holds no, wrongdoings. And you look at it and it sounds so great as you're about to take your vows and say your vows, for better or for worse, right? We're taking these vows. We don't even know what that means when you're getting married. You're so focused on the ceremony of the day and the Disney almost version of a wedding, that you glaze right over that. But when you're in the day to day and you really look at, what does it mean for love to be patient and love to be kind? Gosh, I am not a patient person. There's a lot of parts of me that are not kind, innately kind. I just want to be mean right now. But when you're putting God in that place of being at the top of your life, you're here to serve God, you're here to come from that well of unconditional love, then you can bring that into your relationship with another person. So for us, again, that really, really changed us from almost being in a stance of being enemies. We're here to battle, to, oh, wait, we're not here to battle. We're iron sharpening iron. We're coming together in this sacred container of a relationship, and we're here to sharpen one another. We're not sparring mates in the sense that we're here to stab one another. We're sparring mates of one another's souls.
Right. That's why humility is so important. That's one of the reasons why humility is so important. Because for iron to sharpen iron, effectively what you need to do is acknowledge your imperfections. And that's a hard thing to do, especially in a situation where you feel like one of you is halfway out the door. That was definitely a thing that we had to get past. Certainly I had abandonment issues, and I had a lot of fears in the marriage that you were walking out the door. And everything I knew to do to try and keep you from walking out the door was pushing you further. And you had the recognition, or Molly inspired you, or somehow this came up where you addressed that directly. You sort of shut the door. You said effectively, I'm not going anywhere. And that was a pivot point. That was a turning point for us, where finally in that moment, I started to feel safe. Because the truth is, I didn't feel safe. Right now, as we're talking through, it's kind of clear. I didn't feel safe either. Once that door was closed, it was like, okay, this isn't going to be the end of our marriage. This is the beginning of us working to fix it and agreeing that we're not walking out. That was really kind of step one. And that's worth acknowledging because a lot of people out there are in this situation where they're already like, I'm basically ready to go. And every day becomes a little series of tests that the other person inevitably fails because they don't know that they're being tested and they don't know what the expectations are. Do you know what I mean? Because communication isn't clear. Communication isn't clear because people don't feel safe. And there's probably not complete honesty going on. So anyway, we certainly dealt with a lot of those challenges. And again, it started with humility. It started with you stepping out, taking a risk. And then sometime after that, I think in response to what I felt from you, which was a softening, I felt like I could actually be a little bit more vulnerable. And that opened the door for me to start to be humble, to allow myself to be humble. Because to be humble is to acknowledge your imperfections. And when you feel like somebody's about to walk out the door, you think, well, if they see the real truth, that'll push them out the door. So that is both, an act of humility and an act of faith. And so I think to your point, for me, when I found my humility was when I realized that my hierarchy was out of order. And that's when I realized I need to put some forethought into this. And I really do need to put God at the top here. And as soon as that happened, everything changed within the family. There's the expression, as goes the father, so goes the family. And I think we really proved it true. Because when my energy shifted and I started to lead, it was like everyone was relieved. Everyone was relieved. Whether they realized it or not, it was like there was some internal barometer within every member of the family who was like, oh, okay, maybe I am safe here. So one of the first things that we'll talk about is masculine and feminine energy. And, there's traditional roles and people have different opinions about those things, but what's undeniable is energy and where we are each comfortable. When there's an energy that you bring to the relationship that is very complementary to the energy that I bring to the relationship and vice versa. But they're different. So it can be very easy to feel like you said, we should be like this instead of like this. And that to me is kind of the beginning, the foundation of so many other themes that we can talk about, because ultimately we'll always point back to this, like, which feels like the masculine space, which feels like the feminine space. And for men out there who don't know, because they may have never had a masculine role model in their life, a healthy masculine role model, they may need to hear like, hey, there is a healthy way to assert yourself as the head of the household. There's a kind, gentle way to do it where you might be amazed at the response you get from your wife, for example. So that for me was a huge eye opener when we started to understand the difference between those energies and which space each of us was in initially and how unhealthy that was. And each of us being humble enough to say, I've not been playing my part appropriately. Let's both pivot. And it was like, we both pivoted simultaneously. It was like this dance move where we both were like, boom. And each of us, as the other was moving, we're like, this feels great to me. Does this feel great to you? And each of us was like, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to hold on something that you said about men becoming more vulnerable and opening up. And me assuring you that I was in this. Like, I'm here. I'm not leaving. I don't have one foot out the door anymore. Once we made that decision to really intentionally work on ourselves and therefore work on the marriage, it was very, very important. And I want our listeners to hear this, for us to have that solid agreement that we're in it, that I'm in it and you're in it, and we're not enemies. Many times, especially in the earlier days of working through the hard stuff that we were opening up and having challenging conversations that we had shoved down, not had, avoided for many years. And when we're raising children, those of you who are listening who have children, It can be really actually easy and convenient to ignore a lot of things because you're focusing on the children, you're running all over the place, you're tag teaming, and in a sense, you're co-parenting here, and they become your focus. But as you said, there's a whole lot of years after them leaving, and our children were picking up on the energy of us. So as they were entering into their teenage years, they became little mirrors to all of our wounding, all of the parts of us that were the ugly parts. They were our flaws. And it was right in our faces in three teenagers. And then here we are trying to parent well three teenagers, and we're not on the same side and we're not on the same team. We had good cop, bad cop going on a lot over here. And so it was go time for us. We are very, very committed to our children. We're really committed to family. And it was a massive wake up for us. So when I began my work with Molly, and then you started working with Molly, and we both dropped into humility in the process and moved God to the top, we had to make it almost like a recommitment to our vows for one another. And I assured you that I wasn't going anywhere because in the beginning, you weren't so sure. You weren't so sure. And I wasn't so sure. I wasn't so sure. But once we started this work and I realized, oh, wait, the grass is not greener. Divorce doesn't sound like something that would be easy at all. That's not what I want for our children. More than anything, I was motivated, and I know you were too because you come from divorce. I was very, very motivated for our children's sake to do the hard work of overcoming all the things that were in the way of us having a beautiful, healthy marriage that honored the commitment that we made to one another in 1998 for better or for worse. You know, a lot of people think about for better or for worse when you get married and you think, okay, we're going to go through some hard things. We're going to go through unemployment, which we did. We're going to go through perhaps loss of loved ones, which we have. Maybe some sickness in there, which we have. Yeah, you gain some weight, right? But I really see the worst. And having, again, walked through a season of tearing the house down in our marriage and rebuilding, I see the worst as the commitment to sticking with it and staying together when things are rocky, they're messy, you're again tearing the house down, you're looking at the ugliest parts of yourself, and then you're sharing that with your partner. That's so vulnerable to say, oh, I've really, really taken a humble look in the mirror, and I'm going to share this part of myself with you. The crazy part is you already know it, but to hear it come with the humility and the honesty out of the mouth of your partner. And I know for you as a man, that was hard. Me trying to control and fix you and the energy of trying to control and fix you was never going to get you to open up. Me saying I'm not safe unless you look at yourself in the mirror and you change these things about yourself that did not create a container of safety for you. But once I started humbly looking at myself and then being more vulnerable with you and being honest and saying, okay, I'm going to work on me. I'm going to work on being the best me that I can be. And in that, you is going to feel the changes in me. You're going to feel the softness in me. You're going to feel the love. You're going to feel an energy of love where I'm not here to anymore fix and control you. I'm here to do my part in working on the marriage because, again, marriage is two people committing to coming together to go in the same direction of life in your own lanes. And in that, you create the third thing. So I can't go over into your lane and make you do anything, but I can work on becoming better. And the beautiful thing, and I work on this with many of my clients, is when you start working on you, that person is going to feel it. That energy is going to ripple out. Most likely, that is going to start to challenge the other person because our souls really do desire growth and evolution. That's what we're here for. We're here to grow. We're here to overcome a lot of these things that we come in with, that we're conditioned with in this life. So by us focusing on ourselves and really embodying, as and we're going to talk about that in a minute, like perhaps like the feminine role, being more feminine, committing to dropping, like I had to commit to dropping a lot of my masculine habits. They were habits. I thought I had to do them. Like, I'm in charge. I do everything. I'm going to control everything in this house. There was so much tightness in that. That was blocking you from stepping up and into that.
Hmm, true. Although, yes, that's true. Although I have to own not stepping into that role. And I think it's important for people to hear too that there's going to be a natural there's going to be a natural, we'll call it complementary set of traits that drive one another crazy, but that's what drew the two of you together, right? So when we think about you being controlling and me being too passive, well, part of the reason we were able to get along early on was because I was looking for someone to be controlling and because you were looking for someone who was passive enough to be controlled because of the issues you had, the issues I had. So part of what we had to understand was, okay, for me, I had to understand some of this behavior that drives me crazy, I have demanded effectively. I have effectively demanded that you exhibit this behavior and vice versa. But I don't own that part. I own my part of demanding this behavior. What is that? How am I done that? Through a vacuum of masculine energy from me. Okay. So once we figured that part out, we were able to address it. But it always starts with us, ourselves. And so to your point, you're taking ownership of your part of it. I have to take ownership of my part of it. It can't be, yeah, she did this and therefore I couldn't step into that space. Like, no, I can't even live in that space. I have to be humble enough to say, no, I failed to step into that space. Because I could always argue that if I stepped into that space proactively, you might have felt like, oh, okay, I can actually sit back and relax. Now, we could argue that you were such that you would really push back hard, but because you're very strong and strong-willed, and so that's one of the things I appreciate about you. And up until that time, it didn't take much for me to just go, well, see, clearly, anytime I try and take a leadership role, I get battered down. So anyway, that's good of you to recognize that you were stepping into that space, and we both see huge value in understanding the appropriateness of what's the masculine space and what's the feminine space, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of women think that they need to do it all, and women struggle to ask for help, struggle to receive help. There's a lot of pride there. And sometimes there's even passive aggressiveness in the I'm going to do it all. And I'm going to do it all. And yet at the same time, I'm going to resent you for not showing up and doing your part. But you're over there going, well, she's doing it all anyway. She's not even letting me. She's not asking me. And she's going around with that energy. So I'm going to just let her.
Yes. And when I do it, she tells me I did it wrong. That's a very common thing. I emptied the dishwasher wrong, or I filled the dishwasher wrong, or I folded the clothes wrong. That's a common thing, right? It's not just that I have to do it all, but it's also I have to do it all because only the way I do it is acceptable, which is a thing that some people have to let go of, right? Should we circle back and kind of talk just a little bit now about what we'll talk about over the course of the next
Absolutely,
episodes?
absolutely.
Yeah.
The podcast, our whole theme of the podcast is obviously it's called the daily surrender, and it's surrendering the things that get in the way of us receiving all. And all comes from the creator. All is the abundant life that God created us for, that is available for each and every one of us. So when we're looking at in a relationship, when you're in a relationship, a very committed container of a relationship, All is available to you, even when you think that it's hopeless, even when you are living in the same home and yet you feel like strangers. You really, really can get to a place of reconnection, and it can be better, better than you ever imagined it could be. And it takes surrender. It takes surrendering all the things that you're walking around with, that you're putting in a position of power over God. It's not about surrendering to God, it's surrendering the other thing. So, what we really want to talk about in our marriage series, which I have to figure out the schedule for how I'll air them, but I really wanted to bring this conversation to my audience because so many people and who listen to this podcast are in relationships, and every relationship, even if it's a really good relationship, can get better. Like, we're not done. We very consciously work on ourselves every day and therefore work on the marriage. We work on our communication. We ask one another, how can I help you? How can I serve you? How can I be a better partner to you? We do that now eagerly. We want to do that. We want to please the other person. We want to love and support the other person. And again, we do it with humility instead of where we were years ago. So, some of the other things that we're going to be touching on in the podcast, today's episode really is just an introduction to marriage and the conversation that, these conversations around how do you go from it being either not so great or just maybe mediocre to fantastic. So,
Sure.
yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about how we think we'll organize this, and of course we can adjust this as we go. But we figure our first real episode we'll dive into this. We'll talk about the masculine, the feminine energy, and the behaviors that go along with each, and we can talk about where we each were initially, and a little bit about why. But talk a bit too about how those come out and how those are received by the other, right? So, like when a woman is in her masculine, how does it feel when you're a man? And when a man is not in his masculine, what is a woman? Why is she tend to move into the masculine, for example? So we can definitely spend some time talking about that. And we think that's a good place to start because so many of the other things we'll talk about will really harken back to that as sort of a foundation, right? There's how do men and women speak to one another differently? There's so many there's subtle things in the way that you can ask me a question or say something to me that lands completely differently than a different way to say it. If we would say the wrong way to say it, but just there's ways that it's really well received, and then there's ways that it's like, ooh, that feels critical, and vice versa. So absolutely talking to one another. And one of the things that we have to spend a good amount of time on is truth. Getting to truth. Humility is the path to truth. And as you say, shutting that door. You shut that door and you opened a world to truth. You said, okay, the door is closed now. So even if truth comes out, we're not leaving. And that was really important. It's like we have to get to a place where we can speak truth. And for men and for women, it can be hard to speak truth. It can be hard to hear truth. And I think it's different for men and for women, and like how that works. Women receive truth, I think, in a different way than men receive truth, and vice versa. So we can easily spend some time talking about that. That has been to me, one of the most fantastic learnings, to where now even when things come up, it's like, okay, I don't know if this is a fire, but I can walk right toward it because I know that I can approach her. And I think I know the right way to ask the question. And I know she's humble and she's going to be receiving it with an open mind. All these things are how we lead to truth. Okay. And then of course we could talk to offshoots about that, making sure you stay like teammates, wifing versus mothering, all those things. So we don't have to go through every specific detail we'll get to, but there's a few different themes that we can spend some episodes drilling into. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, awesome. I'm really grateful for you coming on and having this conversation with our audience here. And for those of you who've enjoyed this episode, if you would please leave us a comment, let us know what you do want us to talk about when Dante comes back on the podcast. Share this with anyone that you feel may be blessed by this episode. And don't forget to grab my Calm and Receive mini retreat. I have that available for you for free. The link is in the show notes. And if you're looking for help in working on yourself so that you can work better in your own relationship, reach out. I do one-on-one coaching, freedom journeys, and I do work with couples in the container in order to help them each individually become the better people that are helping feed into the third thing. Until next time, my friends, continue the daily surrendering so that you can let go and step into the abundant life that God has available for you.
Thank you for joining me on the Daily Surrender. If today's episode spoke to you, I'd love to hear your reflections. Send me a message, share this with a friend, or leave a review. Remember, true healing and freedom come when we let go, surrender, and trust that God's way is so much better than our way. Until next time, my friends, keep surrendering, keep rising, and keep walking in peace.